Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, Bob's Garage. Today I'm going to be working on the 1967 Jeepster. I had a little bit of problem with a bit of a bog off idle and some missing, so I thought I'd take a look at it. I'll show you what I found along the way. I've always had problems with this car when I got it with the ignition. It was plumbed up so it would be working off, not off manifold vacuum, but off vacuum in the air horn. It's the top of the carburetor. So the more load, the more airflow going to the carb, the more vacuum is created in the top of the carburetor, versus a ported manifold vacuum where it's underneath the carburetor. So when the butterflies are closed, it has higher vacuum. This is an AC Delco distributor, so that's not the way it's supposed to be worked. So I corrected that. The ignition timing was also way advanced. And I found a few other things I'll describe in the video along the way. So this was really just a minor check because, like I said, I've had a bit of stumbling and bog. So I'll take you through it along the way. I apologize in advance for the video quality. Phone went dead halfway, had to move the car the other way, so it's pretty choppy, but at least enjoy it and see what you found. It's kind of interesting because the 225 Buick engine is a little bit of a strange one, an odd fire, and I'll go into a little bit more detail on that along the way. So enjoy. Hope you find some interesting facts in there. I'll show you what I've learned along the way. Thanks. So I've got the lobe on the point's set in the wide lobe. Don't know how well you can see it from here. No, it doesn't look, you can see it too well. So that's when the points are open, so I'm just going to check the gap now. So you can see here that the points are open. Maybe this angle might be better. The points are open, so I'm just going to run a little bit of an emery board or a file right through the points to clean them up, and then check the gap on them. So it's got some 180 sandpaper. Just going to go through it teeny little bit. There doesn't look to be much coming off. And should be 16th thousandths of an inch. And that's a bit too big. Okay, so I just gotta pull this in, get a little bit tighter. Double check here. Just a little bit of drag now, a bit more. They seem like they're about 20 thousandths. Try that. And it's just about it there. I'll open it up just a tad more. Yep, that feels pretty good, just a little bit of drag. Okay, so that's going to have thrown off the timing now. The rotor actually looks pretty good. No oxidation on the front tip. Put that back in, and the points looked okay. Like I said, just more or less a bit of a cleaning. And check this because I once had a problem bringing the car out of storage and just no power. It would idle, but it wouldn't come up above power or come off idle, and I limped all the way home.
and that's all it was the gap had gotten a little bit small. Just the rubbing block on the cam had worn down a little bit, and that's what made the difference. So I was saying before, these on the rubbing block, the rotor that opens and closes the points, because it's an odd fire, you have one narrow point like a regular distributor, and then one wide lobe, and that's to get the 90 and 150 degree firing order, or not firing order, but rotations of the crank before it fires. This is effectively like a V8 with two of the cylinders is taken off. So some strange things. Later on in the later V6s, the even fires, what they wound up doing is changing the crankshaft so it would fire evenly through the rotation of the crankshaft. So I can't remember what the difference would be. I guess it'd be something 125 degree firing order. So they did that by offsetting the journals, the crankshafts, everything's there. But these were the really old ones, and that's how they did it at the time. So I'm gonna get the timing light out and see how it's affected the timing. Okay, I got the timing light on. Number one cylinder hooked up to the battery. Now I'm just going to disconnect the vacuum and plug that. It's not as good as I'd like it to be. Oh, I know. There, use the screwed up plug of the alternator, the plug of the vacuum line, and we'll start it up. So, not sure how well this is going to show up, but it is. Okay, so my battery went dead on my phone, so I picked up the other camera, so I didn't get to record the last of it, so I'll just take you through what happened. When I left off, I think I was setting up the timing. So when I found this, the points were set up about 20 thousandths of an inch and not 16 where they're supposed to be. So I cleaned them up. I closed the gap down to 16 thousandths of an inch. But what happens then is, now with the gaps closed, it takes a little bit longer for the rubbing block of the points. I've got my screwdriver here, so I can't show you, but it takes a little bit longer for the rubbing block of the points to lift the points, or open the points. It contacts a little bit later in the rotation. So what happens with that is the timing's retarded. So when I put the timing on, I was only at 0 degrees. So it kind of makes sense. I'll show you that if I can. Just one second. So this is kind of lucky. In the garage here, just happens that they're on the top dead center mark. Now it could be top dead center, or it could be 180 degrees out from, or 360 out from that. It could be on the compression stroke, or it could be on the exhaust stroke. But anyways, you can see the timing marks there. The reading's not that great. So what I typically do is put a little bit of white paint on there. But it's right now you can see it's right exactly on the 5 degree mark. That's what the timing requirements for this are. And at the very bottom you'll see it's 0. So there's 2.5 degree markings on the timing indicator. Now what I did is actually gave it just a little bit more I put it at about 6-7 degrees, I think it was. So the reason I did that was, well, the reason I started all this was just checking, but what I had was a little bit of hesitation just off idle. And I wasn't sure what that was, carburation, whatever, but I thought I'd go through and check this. So now I've got it about 7 degrees, so I'm running premium. This motor, I reconditioned the heads, put a new cam in it, that's another story. And it's got hardened valve seats. So I run premium on it, so a couple extra degrees, and there's quite a bit of difference. Took it for a drive, and that it completely eliminated the hesitation off idle. Very snappy, and just performance right through normal RPM range is really great. Now I am finding when I get up a little bit higher speeds, which I normally don't do, but frankly it was running pretty good. And when I got to higher speeds, I was having just a little bit of chugging. So I don't think that's ignition. I think what's happening there is it's a little bit of carburation. I'm probably putting a little bit of load on it. It's kind of leaning it out a little bit. So I'll take a look at that in another video. So I hope you found this somewhat interesting. Sorry for not having it broken up a little bit. But it was, I thought I'd at least share with you how I set that up. And again, for, you can see another segment after this, a little bit more about 225 and the timing. And this is the orientation you want to have for the distributor. The vacuum advance pointing in this location, the number 1 cylinder, it's on there, right there. Number 1 cylinder, that's the mark for the number 1. This must go to the number 1. This orientation must be like this. If you can do it differently, but if you do it differently, you'll be way off because of the unique firing of an odd fire Buick V6. So if you're on about the history of the V6, just keep watching and you'll see a little bit of information about the history of the motor and the uniqueness of setup of this distributor. Well everyone, thanks for watching, and look forward to a few more videos on the Jeepster. I'll probably do a full introduction on it a little bit later, and I'm also be doing a little bit of a short series of videos on the carburetor replacement. If you're probably, some people who are paying attention, notice this has got a Holly. Works good, but it seems like way too big of a carburetor for this. So I've got an original Rochester carburetor. So I'll show you what I got there, show you putting together, rebuilding and put it back together. There's lots of videos on Rochester 2 jets, but you might find it a little bit interesting. Anyways, thanks for watching again, and hit the subscribe button, the like, and the notify button, just like all the other channels say. Thanks. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about the history of the 225 for anybody who's interested. It's kind of interesting. They started with the Buick V8 engine and effectively just cut off the last 2 cylinders. So it shares a whole lot of parts, but because of that, doing it that way, it created a few problems for it as well. And I'll explain that a little bit. And also on top of that, it passed hands back and forth a little bit. So it started off with Buick, using a lot of the Buick sedans, then got bought up by Kaiser, and Kaiser bought the patterns, and they made that engine for a period of time. And it was in Jeepsters, Commandos, CJ5s for a while. And then afterwards, when AMC bought Kaiser, then AMC put their 6-cylinder in. Buick bought back the 225, and then they increased it to the 231, and then became an even fire, and so goes on and so forth. So fairly long history. Nice compact light motor, 160 horsepower, and again, lots of interchangeability of parts. So I want to explain a few unique things about the setting up the timing for it. So just drew this out here. Hopefully this helps explains a little bit. So you take 2 rotations of the motor to go through a complete cycling. So if you have 8 cylinders, then you would have 90 degrees of rotation between each firing of the cylinder. So that 720, because the motor has to rotate around twice for every turn of the camshaft, and that's because you go You go down on the vacuum stroke, you go up on the compression stroke, then you go down on the power stroke, and then you go up on the exhaust stroke. So when you divide that by 6 cylinders, you come up with 120 degrees if it was even fire. And that's what they did later on. The journals for the crankshaft were offset, and they could basically have stagger in the journals so they can get 120 degrees. But back in the early days, the original odd fires, what they had was 90 degrees. Then the next firing, there was a pause. So instead of going 90 degrees, you would wait an additional, 60 degrees before you get into the next cycle. So I tried to draw this out, and this looks really crappy, but what you have here is basically the lobes of an odd fire on the distributor, the cam. So you have 6 points which to fire. So how and these exaggerated lobes are the actual lobes on the rotor of the cam. So you can see here, I got a pointed one, got a narrow, pointed one, pointed one, pointed one, and separated by a broad one. So as you know, the timing, the spark plug fires when the sparks points open, and that collapses the field in the coil, and then recloses, recharges, and does it again. But when you come 9 degrees rotation for the next one, what it does is it holds them open. It pauses that 60 degrees, then it closes and starts. You don't want to leave it. You don't want to leave the contacts closed long. You don't want to ever have power to your coil for excessive period of time. You can damage the coil. So they just pause the contacts open until they're back in the normal cycle, close, and then again 90 degrees rotation, and it fires. 90 degrees rotation, and it fires, and pauses 60, and then starts over. So it was described in one article I read is a series of V2 engines with pauses between them. So 3 two-cylinder engines with pauses. So it's kind of neat, and that's why it's got a bit of a unique sound note, is that normal 90 degree separation of rotation, and then you've got a 6-degree pause, and then you start back up to 90 degrees again, and then the same thing, pause back and forth. So it's kind of cool. Now for that reason, the setup of the distributor is really important. If you don't get that number 1 cylinder at the right lobe, where your timing is completely mismatched to the rotations of the engine and to the firing order of the cylinders. So it's really critical that there's a one specific mark. So these old odd fires had a mark in the cap. They have 2 different types of distributors, an AC Delco and Prestolite, I think it was. So you have to make sure that those caps are marked with the one location for the number 1 cylinder. That's got to be ran to the number 1 cylinder, and it's got to be orientated on that correct lobe of the cam. So you know that when you look at the vacuum canister and the vacuum advance on distributor, it's supposed to be in a specific phase, and you would be effectively 90 degrees rotated for it to work. You can make it. You can turn the oil pump drive, and you can change all the wiring on the cap so that it will fire on the wrong lobe. But yeah, that's not, I can imagine, really good for the engine, because you're firing very early, very late. Effectively, you split probably a 30-degree difference between the cylinders to make it even run. And you're going to wind up having 30-degree retard on some cylinders, 30-degree advance on other cylinders to get it to run. So it will run terrible.
It will run and probably get pre-ignition, a few other things as well. For this motor, I found a few things. I've always had a little bit of an idle issue with it, idle quality, and aside from the odd-fire characteristics of it. But so I did a lot of investigation. Actually, it was a remanufactured distributor. Found out it was put inside a Buick 455 housing, the new rotor. I changed that out. I got the correct housing to put the new rotor into. Really didn't make any difference, because although the cap didn't fit quite as right, an AC Delco distributor is the same from one to the other. But at least I eliminated that as an option. But yeah, it's you'll see a fair bit of reading if you're doing any of the early CJ web forums or whatnot. The setup of the 225 odd fire is something that you've got to be fairly particular about.